Good evening, punters, and welcome to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a betting perspective. As you'll notice, I was absent last Sunday for the recap pod, so I had Jacob take care of it with Clarkey from Clarkey's Rugby League column, and I left Jacob to take care of the recap in our first losing round of the season, so I chose a good time to have a birthday and be absent, but I had good reason and I had a great birthday weekend. I was actually at the Storm Roosters game on Thursday night, so a good birthday weekend, but not so good of a punting week for us, but we'll look to turn that around in a bounce back spot week 9. Jacob, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm all right. When we lose, it does hurt us too. We put a lot of work in to try and find as many winners. If you guys interact with us in the game threads, you can tell we're death riding a lot of these plays, and so, you know, I do feel bad genuinely when we lose, but at the same time, when you give out a bunch of tips every week, every season, like losing weeks are a part of punting. So I guess after 8 full rounds of the NRL, we're still at 60% winners, which is a great position to be in, and we're fighting hard again this week to find more winners. On that game that you went to, Roosters Storm, what a game to get to go to, especially living in Brisbane, to get to go and see 2 good footy teams play. That's the first time that's happened this season, and you weren't here on Sunday, so thanks to Clarkey who did share some thoughts. But I was wondering, since the first game we'll handicap is Cowboys Roosters, what was your takeaway from that classic encounter?
Oh, just an absolutely cracking game, and what a game to go to for a Thursday night, and the first game that I've gone to at Suncorp this season, arguably, the 2 best teams in the comp, and I was kind of, before I went, I was like, it's a shame, that Munster's not playing in this one, because Storm will probably roll, and obviously, we had a bunch of bets Roosters will probably roll. We had a bunch of bets on the Roosters, so they're up double digits, late, and I'm cheering on the bets, obviously, and then once the Storm got within 1 try, I was like, oh shit, can we still win any of these bets? Then, the Storm get up. And at that point, I start cheering for the Storm because we've got the Panthers, the Panthers' future to win the minor premiership and all that sort of stuff.
And we'd already hit Roosters over 19.5, I think, the team total at least.
That's right. That's probably the craziest last 5 minutes and, extra time that I've ever seen in my life, especially to
I shared some thoughts on it as well, but something else that sprung to mind was last year, the Roosters went down to Melbourne early in the season. The Roosters had a few key outs. Melbourne should have won that game, but the Roosters were up 20-0, and the Storm came all the way back, I think 20-all. It went to Golden Point, and what I remember, who kicked the winning field goal in that? Was it Cooper Cronk? No. Keary? No. It was Latrell Mitchell.
Yep.
And I just find it funny, the chess between these coaches, that then, fast forward a year later, everyone thought it would be Cameron Smith or maybe Jerome Hughes, and they kind of caught him with the sleight of hand with Lil Puppy kicking a clutch 40-metre field goal. So I thought that was an exciting wrinkle as well.
Even for the Roosters, for their first field goal, it looked like it was going to Flano, I thought, and then, flipped it out to Keary. So, but just absolutely cracking game. What a game to be at. Even though I don't remember much from after the game. So. But it's a good segue, Jacob, and let's move into the Thursday night game. It is the Cowboys up against the Roosters. The Cowboys are plus 12.5 point underdogs. The total sitting at 43.5 points. This is an interesting one. And obviously, from a betting perspective, there's reasons to go against the Roosters in this one. Not only because of the ridiculous game against the Storm, on Thursday night. And that was an absolutely physical game, not only extra time, but, an emotional loss, being up double digits in that one late. But the thing is, they do get a full week of rest for this one. Downsides for the Roosters in this one, you travelled to Brisbane last week, and now you have to travel to Townsville. That does take it out of you, especially after such a grueling game. So there's reasons to like the Cowboys, and I actually do like the Cowboys in this one. Pretty embarrassing performance against the Eels, but the Eels are just on fire for that one. And I just, watching that game, and I think you'll probably think the same way, Jacob, I thought the Cowboys dominated for the first 15 minutes, not only possession, but they had numerous chances that they butchered. And I think once they didn't score any of those and the Eels got the first try, then they kind of fell apart after that. But in terms of the roster changes, now the big one here is Valentine Holmes to the wing and the Hammer at fullback. And a lot of people are kind of jumping up and down because Val Holmes is on a shitload of money, and to play him on the wing makes no sense. But I actually like this play. I think, they think of the Hammer as the future of their club, and he is a talented guy. And to be honest, Valentine Holmes has been disappointing at fullback this year. And I like keeping him in the team at wing. He's been great at wing in the past, and I think he just needs to get some reps under him, and he will get better. So I don't mind the move for the Cowboys. My one concern, even though that I am, we are going to be on the Cowboys in this one, my one concern is that last year's game that the Cowboys and the Roosters played, the Cowboys beat the Roosters 15-12. I remember it very clearly. I think you were overseas at the time. The Roosters completely overlooked the Cowboys, and they lost that game. And after that, they put the hammer down and they went on a big run. So I just think that the Roosters won't overlook them, but catching more than 2 converted tries at home in Townsville is probably a little too many.
I do remember that when I was sitting on a beach in Sicily and I had the Watch NRL app and I thought, I'll flick it on, might be a game on. Oh, it's Cowboys Roosters. This won't be very good. And then I watched it anyway, and it was kind of good because the Cowboys pinched it. And I actually came away from that game going, man, a lot of things went wrong for the Roosters. I still think they're going to win the comp this year. But the problem was by the time I got back to Australia, they'd then flogged the Knights by 50, won a bunch of other games, and just went from strength to strength. But you're right. They will remember that the Cowboys pulled their pants down last year. Now, with the Cows, I agree. They weren't actually too bad first half against Eels, but by about the 60-minute mark, they'd absolutely had enough, and they folded. So while that's extremely disappointing, we know that they can perform better. I mean, when they beat the Knights, don't forget, Val Holmes was out, and Tabu Aifido did play fullback, and I think they know he adds a spark with these new rules. He's a genuine electric athlete that can hover around the ball and is dangerous in space, even though he's very raw. And you're right, like, you don't sign Val Holmes $1 million a year to play on the wing, but in this modern era, wingers can impact a game more than usual. Val Holmes can still get 15 plus carries, and he is running is his strength.
Wingers can have a bad influence too, like O'Neill last week.
And that's actually another reason why it strengthens, a position of need for the Cowboys, because their outside backs have been diabolical. Like, Drinkwater was laying on tries to regular outside backs and they were dropping them. But also the other reason wingers can swing a game is it can be the difference whether they take a chance or two. And on that note, of course, Tupou was out for the Roosters, and
yes,
no one's going to really talk about that because they should win without him. Boyd Cordner is out. Again, like, these losses add up when you lost Verrills and Radley the week before. I know I talked about in the recap that Crichton, he's now the best back rower on this team, and he can do more, and this team still should be too good for the Cowboys. But it is a lot of points for a side playing at home. I think we're going to take the Cowboys, especially if they can start strong in this game. We just need them to hang in there.
Indeed we do, and we've just got the one best bet for this one. We are taking the Cowboys plus 6.5 points in the first half. You'll find that one at $1.88 on Ladbrokes and on Neds. Let's move on to the Titans up against the Warriors. This game is Pick'em, and the total is 42.5 points. Well, one of these teams has to win this one. Last week, the Titans, we were on them lightly, if so, against the Sharks. And to be honest, I know that they got thumped in the end if you look at the full-time score, but that's 12-10 at half-time and then kind of fell apart second half, so it wasn't too bad of a performance, but the Sharks have just been on fire lately. Now, what I don't like about this Titans team, some more reshuffling now. Mitch Rain out, and they're doing a bit of a backline reshuffle as well. Corey Thompson moves back to fullback, which is his preferred position. That's where he should have been in the first place. He's going to get the ball a bit more there and stuff. In terms of the Warriors, good win against Brisbane. And to be honest, for a shitty team like the Warriors, with all the stuff that they've gone through this year, to be down 10-0 against the Broncos and come back and get that win like that, that is a confidence-boosting win for this Warriors side, I think, after all the shit they've gone through. And we've mentioned numerous times in the past, this is a confidence team. So I think, there's some teams, most teams you don't want to play after a good win. And the Warriors are, the exception to that rule where you kind of do want to get on them after they have a good win. Obviously, they get RTS back, and I think, you can't understate his importance enough. I know we've seen what's happened to this Manly team in terms of, Tom Trbojevic being out, that playmaking ability and all that sort of thing. I think RTS might even mean more to this Warriors team than Turbo means to Manly. So Nick Reamer out, but you get Chanel Harris-Tavita straight back in there, so I don't think that's too much of a reshuffle there. So, I was kind of split on this game, but Jacob, you were a bit more on the Warriors, and I think I have to go with you here. I think they do get the win despite the game being at the Goldie.
And it's a funny one because I imagine more of the public would lean to the Warriors too, because people remember what they saw last. The Warriors had a very impressive win, down 10-0, outscored the Broncos 26-6. notwithstanding how bad the Broncos are. And the Titans had a 40 spot dropped on them. But the Titans are a bit like the Cowboys. It was actually a very competitive first half, and then they got, steamrolled, blown away towards the end. But I don't like the reshuffle again. I mean, Cartwright is not a centre, and this Beau Fermor, he's a good young prospect, played second row, looks quite exciting. But to make him play centre with this Tremaine Spry on the wing, that's a very green outside back combination, and the outside backs is the Warriors' strength. I mean, Kenny Mamalo struggled with that hammy injury, came back last week and was an absolute monster for them and helped them win that game and just did some superstar things. And then, of course, RTS is a superstar. Fusatua has been in and out with injury or personal reasons, and then HIA. But you got all three of them. And you got the junkyard dog, Jazz Tavanga, back in this side. They got Jack Hetherington on loan last week, and he bolstered the forward pack, as did Ignatius Parsi, who had been out with injury. So it's like the weakness of this Warriors team, I thought, was the forwards, but the forwards are actually kind of solid now with a couple of those additions. So I think they're the stronger team, and off a confidence-boosting win, I think that they're going to all be in camp and training this week with RTS back in the side buzzing, and no reason they can't back it up. And I know the Titans will want to improve, and they've lost 10 in a row at home, but I really look across the park, and like you say, Harris Tavita's a great replacement in the halves. I think the Warriors are the better side, and if they come with the right attitude, they win this game.
And you can just imagine throwing up 20 to 30 bombs to the wingers, and they should be able to win that battle. We've got two best bets on the game for now. We're just taking New Zealand straight up to win the game. We're taking it at $1.85 on Bet365. It's not the best price, but you get the extra chance, extra time promotion there. And we are going to take New Zealand to win the first half straight up in a two-way market. The best price for that one is $1.87 on Unibet.
And that extra time, extra chance, it's not really a promo as such. It's just the way that they result their head-to-heads, because everyone knows if you had the Roosters last week head-to-head in any bet or multi, it didn't lose because they were resulted at 80 minutes. But if you win in Golden Point, they will actually result it as a winner. So that's why we're sacrificing 2 cents on the head-to-head there.
Yep, definitely worth it. Let's move on to the Rabbitohs up against the Tigers. The Rabbits are laying 4.5 points and the total sitting at 37.5 points. This is one of my favourite games of the round. I do like the Rabbits here. You get, a confidence-boosting win last week against... the Rabbits get a confidence-boosting win last week, and honestly, sometimes that's all you need. The Sharks got one against the Dogs, and now they've won 3 in a row, and they're on fire. Not only that, reasons to like the Rabbits. Revenge from last year. I remember the game. We were on the Tigers in this one. Cheekham scores a fucking breakaway try with 4 minutes left, and they beat the Rabbits. And this week, Cheekham starts for the suspended Joey Leilua. I like that little wrinkle. I also like that it's a bad spot for the Tigers here. A brutal game against the Panthers. Emotionally and physically draining game. You lose Joey Leilua. And, you've got Mbai injured, Luciano Leilua injured. There's just a lot of things that I like about this Rabbits team, not only because I still think that they're underrated. They had a bad start to the season. Everyone wrote them off. And, like a few weeks back, they lost to the Panthers. Everyone was saying this Rabbits team is horrific. I think that they're the healthiest they've ever been this season. And I think the talent mismatch all over the park favours the Rabbits here. I think they get the job done and cover the small line.
Just to be clear, when you say Mbai and Luciano Leilua, like they're carrying injuries, yes. But they have both been named. It's not that they're out.
Correct.
Now, this could be a finals intensity game because I really do feel that there are 7 sides that are better than these 2, and that leaves one more spot. Now, we'll get to Manly and all the key injuries they have. I obviously feel Manly, when they can put their strongest squad on the park, is better than both of this pair and should get into the 8. But they've lost some close ones. They've got guys out. So there's still obviously a scenario where the Rabbitohs and Tigers both make the 8. But there is also a scenario where the winner of this game gets in and the loser misses out. And I look ahead at the Rabbitohs draw. Their final 6 weeks, they got Manly. Turbo will be back. Fanua Blake, that's going to be tough. They got Eels. They got Storm. They got Roosters. And they have the Tigers again. But they really need to win this one. Yeah, that is because it'll probably be a finals level intensity again against the Tigers. So it's a huge game for both teams. And I know you might think, well, in that case, take the points. But I look across the park and I don't see really any edges to the Tigers. I mean, Harry Grant's been their best player, but can you be sure he's going to outplay the Australian hooker, Damien Cook, I think. I know Latrell's been out of form. I know now Braden Burns got injured, so Jimmy the Jet will have to play a full 80 in the centres. We haven't seen it yet, but I just think this team is building. I completely understand they've been unconvincing so far in 2020, while the Tigers have impressed even in the games they've lost. And I know a lot of people will be on the Tigers in this one, but I actually trust Bennett to get his boys up for an important game when they need it. I know that everyone will think back to the loss to the Panthers. Where was the performance there? But I forgive that one. I just see so much promise in this Rabbitohs team, and I think it'll be same old story of the Tigers. Try hard, but they're just not on the level. And I think that the Rabbitohs should get up by a converted try or more.
Indeed we do, and we've got a bunch of best bets on this one actually, and I might just have to make this a little bit larger so that I can actually see the text myself. We're taking the Rabbits laying 5.5 points for the game. You'll find that one at $2 on Ladbrokes and on Neds. We're taking the Tigers team total under 16.5 points. That one is $2.02 on BetEasy, so a couple of plus money plays there to start us off. We're going to have a mechanical Rabbits race to 20 with insurance. I'll take 10 seconds to explain this one because it is a little bit different. If the Rabbits don't get to 20, we lose. If the Rabbits get to 20 first, we win. If the Rabbits get to 20 second, you get your money back. We're also going to take a mechanical Rabbits laying 2 points in the first half. That one is $1.88, and you're going to put your main stake on Sportsbet and your partial stake on Bet365. Let's move on to the Sharkies up against the Panthers. The Sharkies are plus 5.5 in total, sitting at 40.5 points. This one should be an absolute cracker. Both of these teams playing really good football of late. The Sharks have been absolutely on fire. Like I mentioned before, they had that close win over the Dogs and seem to have brought some confidence to them. They've won a couple of games straight, an 18-point win over Manly, a 30-point win over the Titans. So a little bit of bad news coming out of the Sharks camp. Moylan again with yet another hamstring injury, and I guess this is one of the reasons why we kind of didn't like Sharks for season-long bets, just because their team is just full of injury-ridden players. So Dugan moves to fullback, and who knows how he'll hold up there. Now the Panthers, they've been awesome, and I know that we're on that Panthers bet for the minor premiership, and honestly it could be a team of destiny here, and that's the issue, because this Panthers team sees all these injuries to these top teams and they really think that they have a chance this year, and that's why I wonder, is it going to be a letdown spot for the Panthers, or are they just going to keep rolling along like we saw this Eels team do, for example, last week in what we thought would be a letdown spot? Because they've had the last 4 weeks of pretty much full intensity. Eels game, Storm game, Rabbits, and last week against the Tigers. So that's the wonder for me. I think I'd need plus 6.5 to play the Sharks in this one. But in saying that, I think both teams could score some points here. I've mentioned how bad this Sharks defense is, so I think they'll leak a few, and I think the Sharks can put on some as well. So that's why we're in the overs in this one.
Huge credit to the Cronulla Sharks. After losing the first 3 of the season, and we were all in on them in week 4, saying that was like season kitchen sink, and they got that win in Townsville, and they've won 4 of their last 5. And the only game they haven't won in the last 5 weeks was the game they were the biggest favourites of all, was against the Dragons. They could have even won 5 in a row. So they're playing good footy for sure. I know they lose Moylan, but Mulatalo comes in. I mean, the Panthers lose Brian To'o, which you could argue is almost a bigger loss, just because Moylan's been in and out, whereas To'o is like a gun winger.
Naden's gun.
And that's true. So they can cover, both sides have fair cover in this one. And I think if you want to play the Sharks, as you talked about, you're expecting that lapse from the Penrith, that they're just a young side, relatively young. They're bringing it every week. And then you play a side that is a little bit lower on the standings, although the Sharks have moved into, I think, 6th or 7th. It shouldn't be underestimated, of course. But there's going to be that banana peel. But do you really want to just keep trying to fade a team, trying to guess when that spot will be? They could just be brimming with confidence and just rolling, and you can't really fault the way they've played. So while the energy levels might dip 1 week, I don't know when it's going to be, and I do think Penrith are the better team, and they've got the better forward pack, considering like the age and kind of a couple of the guys in the Sharks team past their prime. So I feel like the line is relatively fair, that the Panthers are about a converted try better than the Sharks. So I don't see the line as great value in either direction.
Yeah, and it may have been if the Sharks were legitimately at home, but this is on a neutral venue. So, look, we are taking a couple of over bets in this one. This one's an interesting one. We're taking our first same-game multi of the season. We're going to take the Panthers and Sharks both to score over 12.5 points. Now that's $1.88 if you make that with a sports bet same game multi. And our second bet for the game is the first half to be over 18.5 points. The best price for that is $1.87 on Unibet.
And I should say, we want to trend towards betting overs because we know the intention of the NRL is for, all the praise they're getting that the games are more open and flowing. It's going to be more of the same. We think this is an afternoon game. We've spoken to how we like the Sharks as an over team because they're not the world's most stout defense, but they do have class in attack. And if anything, the Tigers, being so scrappy last week, suppressed the Panthers' stats. I felt like the Panthers should have scored over 20 last week. So plenty of reasons to like the overs without liking a side in that one.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's move on to the Broncos hosting the Bulldogs at Suncorp on Saturday. The Broncos are laying 4 points and the total is 38.5. Now, interesting, the Broncos have named pretty much the same roster as they did last week, despite Seabold being under immense pressure to do something there with the Broncos after losing 6 in a row to restart the season. I guess one good thing for the Broncos is Katoni Staggs might come back, and honestly, for the first couple of games of the season, he was one of their best. But yeah, just a disappointing performance from the Broncos against the Warriors at 10-0 up, and we were on them last week. At 10-0 up, you kind of think that they're going to go on with it, but look, one of these teams has to win this week, and it probably is the time to take the Broncos, but I just can't do it. And you know what I think I want to do with this Broncos team, and I might be waiting for quite some time? I want to implement some losing streak theory, and I think really the time to take the Broncos will be after they break their losing streak and get that first win. So much pressure will be off them. They'll be able to play a bit more freer footy. So I think that's going to be the time to take the Broncos. For me, it's just too tough to guess when they're going to be able to turn it on. Obviously, against a Bulldogs team that's pretty average, this could be the week. But look, this Bulldogs team has been putting in week and week out. Even though they're pretty talent devoid, they've still been putting in. You lose Adam Elliott, so we get our first look at Luke Thompson, but who knows how good he's going to be after having a week or two in quarantine and whatnot. So look, I do think that the Bulldogs will compete once again. I thought they competed last week. I didn't think that they deserved to win by 16 points. Lose by 16 points with the late Gagai intercept try. I thought they competed well, so I think they'll do exactly the same this week, and the line is probably fair.
As I said in my recap, I'm genuinely surprised that Seabold is still in charge because the issues are numerous and we don't need to go over it again and again. But we were on the Broncos last week, and just to say it again, okay, you come out of the lockdown 2-0, you got beat by the Eels, by the Roosters, you got beat in a heartbreaker by Manly, you got beat by the Knights. So I felt while there was a lot of criticism, you got beat by 4 teams that were far better than you. Then they lost to the Titans. And I was willing to even say, all right, they overlooked the Titans. They thought that they would win that easy. So then last week, there's no excuse. I'm not here making any excuses for the Broncos. They were pitiful. They were disgraceful. Not just losing that game, but the way that they played with just a lack of discipline, lack of heart, truly. And I know that there was some tears after the game and everything like that. But honestly, it could go from, you could get even lower if you don't win this one, which is at home against the team that's last on the ladder. And Staggs comes back into the side. They've moved Oates to the second row, but the loss of Elliott is big for the Dogs. So ultimately, I think on paper, I still would say Brisbane is the better team. When you add Staggs, he's probably the second best player on this side behind Payne Haas, with Fafita still on the sidelines.
Right.
So if they're a little bit better and they've got home advantage, although it won't be much of an advantage to being booed, they should be favoured by 2 to 4 points. And they are. So, again, like you said, or as I said before with Penrith, you can try and guess the week that they'll have a down spot and keep fading someone that's on a roll, or you can try and guess the week that a team will finally turn it around, because eventually Brisbane will win again.
Sure.
Whether it's 2020, 2021, they will win another game. But do you want to keep betting on them every week until they do? You might lose 7 more weeks in a row, So as you said, let's just sit back and relax and see how they go.
And look, if I can borrow an NFL reference, I guess, sometimes it is just that way. Sometimes you do win the most money with the good teams. Not all the time, but I think the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens last year, you won the most money on them, and they were 2 of the best teams last year against the spread. Let's move on to what should be the game of the round. It is the Raiders hosting the Storm. This line is pick'em. The total is 34.5. 6.5 points. Should be an absolute cracker. The Raiders get another win against the Dragons, and it wasn't a convincing win. Look, I thought they were better for the majority of the game, probably the first 60 minutes of that game, and I thought
they were better when they were up 22-0.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought they were as well.
A lot better, and they let their foot off the pedal in the second half, which, I guess for a team that, like the Raiders, that hasn't had the best sort of season, maybe they were just trying to get a win in this one, get a tight win, and that's why they let their foot off the pedal in the second half. So I won't take too much away from them there. The big one here for me is the revenge factor for the Storm. I know they're still missing Munster, but there is a chance. Apparently, you told me just before we did this, Jacob, and that convinced me to get on the Storm in this one, that he might be back for this one, which was news for me, and that's going to be a very quick turnaround for that injury for Munster. But this is great revenge spot for the Storm. They got blitzed in the first game back of the 2020 season against the Raiders, and that's when everyone was, calling the Raiders world beaters, and the Storm were past it. They lose 22-6 in that one. Not only that, they lose last year in the finals to the Raiders on a not a last second try, but a late last 5-minute try. They lose in round 22, I think it was, to the Raiders on a try in the last 5 minutes.
They were up 18-0.
It's huge revenge factor for the Storm here. I know you lose Vunny, but I think that the Storm has the better forward pack now that the Raiders lose Soliola for a while and Emre Gula. So even though it's a rough spot to take the Storm after a brutal game on Thursday night, it is a longer turnaround. Don't forget that was a Thursday game. They're staying in Queensland now, which I noted down is going to be a disruption for this Storm team. But I don't think it's going to be a disruption yet. I don't think you're going to feel the effects of the Storm staying in Queensland until later on in the season when fatigue starts to set in. I don't think you're going to feel that now, only after 2 weeks staying in Queensland. So I think the Storm can keep this one close. We've got a few good bets on this one.
I also don't think it disrupts a team that genuinely knows they can win the comp in 2020, like a disciplined squad that is going to get a world of confidence from that comeback win against the Roosters. But what I heard out of that game was, while Craig Bellamy praised his troops and said he was super proud of them for their fight back, he challenged them. Like, if you guys were up for that game, you brought, extreme high level performance against the back-to-back champs. So why can't you bring that level every week? Because if you're capable of it, then the challenge to you is to bring it, week in, week out.
Sure.
You look like you want to say something snide.
No. I was just thinking to myself, it's impossible to bring that sort of level of intensity.
Yeah, but the Melbourne Storm have these standards that, like, yes. Bellamy doesn't accept mail-ins, and he will challenge his team, and they get 9 days to come back. And guys, I want to go back to round 3 where they lost by 16 points at home to the Raiders. That was one of our strongest best bets. We had the Storm -3.5. Can you guys now see why that was such a good bet? The Storm are definitely better than the Raiders. Like, now everybody in our group is like, oh, I can't believe the Storm is an underdog to the Raiders this week, and it's in Canberra. But that week in round 3, everyone was like, oh, you guys underestimating the Raiders made the grand final last year. But we've always said the Storm are better than the Raiders. Of course, without Munster, it brings them closer together. But I heard an interview with Brandon Smith on NRL.com this week. He said one thing that would worry me, that Roosters game was the most physical game of his career and that he couldn't walk for 3 days. And you never want to play a team after a super high-intensity, grueling battle, but they do get the long turnaround. And he also said that Munster's running around the training field and has a really good chance to play this week. And he's named in the reserves. And I think we've seen a little bit of money coming for the Storm today as well. So I think there's a better than 50-50 chance Munster's knee injury was not as bad as they made it out, because they called it a 4-week injury. This would be back in 2 weeks. As you said, Soliola and Gula are out. Don't forget they lost Corey Horsburgh 2 weeks ago, and they're still waiting for Bateman. And that's where it starts with me, is the Storm has world-class forwards in this team. They should win the forward battle. They've got all the motivation in the world to beat their bogey team, and I think they will.
I think if it gets announced in that Munster is playing, Jacob, where do you think this line moves? Storm -2?
Yeah, I think straight away Storm's -1.5, if not a -2 everywhere, if money was officially in.
Indeed, so we're getting in early for this one. We've got 4 best bets on the Storm. We are taking them plus half a point in the first half and the second half, both $1.84, both on BetEasy. We're going to take the Raiders team total under 17.5 points. That is $1.89 on Sportsbet. And we're going to take the Raiders team total under 8.5 points. That's $1.85 on BetEasy.
First half.
Oh, sorry, yeah, under 8.5 points in the first half of the Raiders team total there. Let's move on to the Sunday games. We've got the Knights up against the Eels. The Knights are +4 underdogs. The total is 37.5 points. Really tough game for me because I know that this Eels team is kind of a team of destiny. Even without Moses, they are playing great. But another, not a blow to the Eels, but I guess a little bit of a blow in finding out that the Moses injury is a little bit worse than expected and might be a few more weeks extra on the sideline. But in saying that, this Eels team has just been playing great. I've said for many weeks since the start of the season that this forward pack is underrated, and now finally everyone's kind of realising that this Eels forward pack is legit. But the Knights are a good team. They got lucky to escape with the win over an undermanned Manly side, but that was a really tough game, an emotional win, a grinding win. Look, I don't expect a letdown from the Knights, even though, sometimes you would expect that from a team after a game like that against Manly. But I don't expect a letdown from the Knights because it is their first home game since round one, which was months ago, and they do have a fairly strong home field. But in saying that, you still don't have a packed out stadium there in Newcastle, so not a huge home field advantage for the Knights. But I just cannot do it because, the Eels are legit. They get Nathan Brown back, and Gutho's gone to another fucking level. The guy, he was King Gutho last week. The guy's throwing cutout passes to Sivo like Moses would. So it's a tough one for me. Lean Knights, but no play at the current line.
Yeah, if you want to take the Knights +4, you definitely need to believe that they can win, like at least be close to a 50-50 chance to win for that +4 to be a great value bet. And I look at these teams and how do the Knights win this game? I feel like it would have to be a 5-star performance by Mitchell Pearce because the Eels forward pack is just formidable, and they get back Nathan Brown this week quietly and just takes the pack to another level. Near Corey shifts to the bench, strengthens the bench. And the forward pack is full strength now. The outside backs are stronger than the Knights. I mean, the Knights lose Edric Lee as well. And obviously, you look at the Parramatta centres and their wingers are world class. I know the Knights have Callum Ponga, but you talk about Gutho, it's not even a big edge to the Knights in the fullback jersey. So, yeah, if Mitchell Pearce is, a game of the season, maybe he can steer his team around and get a win. But the Eels are a bit like the Eels are a bit like Penrith. They're just on a roll right now. You're paying a premium if you take them, so I'm not here advocating for Parramatta -3.5, but I am saying, I don't want to get out in front of them because they've just got serious energy, serious belief, playing like a true contender does, and even without Mitch Moses, I think that they're not going to overlook a fellow top 4 side, and they're going to bring it again to McDonald Jones Stadium, and I think they'll win, so don't feel confident with the line in either direction.
Yeah, and sometimes it's one of those games where, gun to your head, I think both of us would take the Knights plus the 4 points, but, without any strong conviction. So, better off leaving the game and fight another day. There are better games in the round.
I should add one more point as well. Kind of what you said. The Knights game was a grueling effort, and that was on a Sunday, so they get 7-day turnaround, whereas the Eels had basically a training run second half against the Cowboys, get the 9 days. But yeah, the form of Junior Paulo and RCG and Madison, now Brown back, just don't want to get in front of this Eels team.
That's a fair call. Junior Paulo has quietly been awesome for that Eels team. Let's get to the last game of the round. It is the Dragons up against the Sea Eagles. The Dragons hosting this one at Jubilee. The Dragons are 1.5 point underdogs, with total sitting at 37.5 points. And I really do think, I don't know if the Dragons are necessarily the sharp side here, because obviously when the season started, everyone was high on Manly. You had Turbo, you had Walker, you had all these guys. And I kind of did say at the start of the season, this is the one worry for Manly is the injuries. And it's been to Tommy Turbo, which I know Cherry Evans is awesome, but Tommy Turbo means the most to that Manly Sea Eagles team. We've seen them struggle, and maybe it's not sharp going against this Sea Eagles side, when everyone kind of knows that Tommy Turbo means that much to this team, but they have another brutal fucking loss last week, and you just worry a little bit. I worry a little bit about this Manly Sea Eagles mental state after yet another loss where there was arguably a blown call at the end where they could have won the game. That's the second time this season that's happened to this Manly side, and you've got to wonder when they start to think, fuck, this is just getting ridiculous, So I wonder how they turn up for this one. I do think that the Dragons too turn up for this one. I mean, They had a gutsy performance against the Raiders. Like I said, they were outclassed for the first 60 minutes, but a good sign for this Dragons team is that they didn't give up. They're not going to make the 8 this year, but they didn't give up. They came back, and they even had a chance. They have chances to get close down the stretch there against the Raiders. And look, what ultimately got me over the line, this is the first home game the Dragons have played since round 2. I think they're going to be stoked about that. You get Tarek Sims back, which is a huge boost. And, I don't actually mind Ben Hunt starting. I don't know about you, Jacob. I don't mind Ben Hunt starting. I don't mind McInnes at lock. I think that adds something to this Dragons team. I like that roster construction. And arguably, I could say that as these two teams are constructed currently, with, Turbo out, Walker out, I'd say they're pretty even teams. You get the Dragons at home, first game at home in a while, they get a boost. So I don't know if they should be underdogs here.
I've been saying that the Dragons look like they're waiting for Hunt to come on. The first 20 minutes are so unimaginative in attack. He actually adds something. He really does kind of suck the markers in when he's got the ball, when he's playing there at rake. You also forgot to mention another massive out for Manly, Adam Fanua-Blake.
True.
And they're going to complain about the hard luck of the call to not get a penalty. I think it should have been a penalty, as I said in the recap. But, okay, it's a touch-and-go penalty, which gives you a sideline penalty shot, which is maybe 50-50, which then gets you a 50-50 to win in Golden Point. We're talking about that call costing them maybe a quarter of a win, if you look at the probability. But losing Fanua-Blake for 2 games for a brain snap to feed the referee, that could cost them more than a quarter of a win. That could be the difference between winning or losing this game. He's so important for him in the middle of the field.
Sorry, if I just plus just also the distraction of the week. Just having every media ask you every time about what's going on with that.
They shouldn't have been in that position. That they were 90 metres from the try line. That this was a 60-metre break on the final play. They had earlier opportunities to score the winning points. They couldn't manage it. And the Dragons get a 9-day turnaround off that Raiders loss. As you say, Tarek Sims comes back in. I really don't see a big edge to the Manly across anywhere in the field. Manly had that tough call against the Eels, the forward pass. That genuinely cost them a win. Don't forget they also got a couple lucky calls in the Broncos win. So it swings and roundabouts. But if Manly's looking for excuses and still thinking about last week, they'll get rolled here. I think if Manly wins, it's because they come out and just out tough and out grind the Dragons, and Desi gets them just absolutely fierce. But the Dragons are coming off back-to-back losses to the Raiders and the Roosters, sides that show you what it's all about. There's no reason they should come in, as you say, first home game in months and be complacent. If they're not complacent, you think arguably they're the better side right now with the players they have available. We're getting them as an underdog.
Indeed we are. We've got a few plays on the Dragons. We are taking the Dragons plus 2 points. That one is $1.91 on BetEasy. We're going to take the Dragons plus 1.5 points in the first half. That's $1.87 on Unibet. And I know that BetEasy moved the lines very quickly, so if you miss out on that Dragons plus 2, what's arguably a better bet is the Dragons plus half a try on Bet365. That one is $1.80. And that is going to wrap it for the Round 9 preview, guys. Thanks once again for joining in. And look, I know we say this all the time, but the pod usually bounces back. I know last year, I don't think we had back-to-back losing rounds the entire season, if I'm not mistaken, but I know that we are bouncing back this week. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will catch you guys on Sunday for the Round 9 recap for hopefully another winning round. Thanks for joining us.
Lego.